All right, hello everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of DOGE Watch. This is where we actually take about a good, 20 minutes or so and go through what DOGE has been doing for the past week. Now, one of the most important things that I think we all need to focus on right now is what DOGE has been doing with respect to DEI. We've had some discussions about what we should expect from DOGE and how it's going to be organized and all of those things. And obviously, there's going to be a lot of things that will require legislation. But when it comes to a lot of the DEI spending within these executive branch agencies, that's as simple as DOGE identifying it and Trump signing an executive order and rescinding funds for it. And this is everything from these little programs to positions that fall within Schedule F to websites that are set up, all of this stuff. And what's fascinating is that within about the first 80 hours of kind of DOGE being officially up and running operations, they're already cutting over $400 million. And a lot of that has been tied to DEI programs. So I want to go through and we're going to go onto the DOGE government efficiency website. In the first 80 hours, approximately 420 million of current and pending contracts have been canceled. 2 leases have also been canceled. Initial focus is mainly on DEI contracts and unoccupied buildings. So this is a big problem. Because understand, when a lot of these people sign up for these contracts, this is one of the way that the left ends up financing their ideological objectives, is they set up contracts for things like DEI. It goes out to their liberal buddies, right, who either have 501c3s or they have, other companies or whatnot. And a lot of times they charge a lot to come in here and do either very little or to push some pretty outrageous concepts and ideologies. Because let's face it, DEI is not just about, we want to make sure that we have a diverse workforce, or that we want to make sure with respect to inclusion that we have people that maybe historically didn't operate in these sorts of functions or occupations. We want to make sure it's more accessible, or we want to achieve greater equity, which is to say that we want somebody that maybe would otherwise be qualified for the job but didn't have the same advantages growing up. We probably would not have the level of disagreement that we do if that's honestly what DEI was about. But it isn't. When they talk about equity, and I had this conversation with a journalist a while back here in the General Assembly here in Virginia, because we were trying to change something from equity to opportunity. And they're like, what is your guys' big hang up with equity? And I said, well, I'll tell you. Equity is supposed to mean a fair and just outcome. The problem is how do you define what a fair and just outcome looks like? And the way the left defines it, especially within the realm of critical theory, is they break everyone down into oppressor and oppressed. And if you're an oppressor, well, then guess what? Equity is not for you, right? Inclusion is not for you. You're the bad guy. But if you fall within one of these oppressed classes, well, then what DEI stands for is giving you an advantage, because whatever disparities the DEI proponents have isolated or identified are always a result of racism or bigotry or sexism or some other form of evil discrimination. And so the end result is that they set up these programs in order to push a particular ideology or way of explaining the world, a way of explaining disparity. And we've seen this before within our education system, where for a while there, we would say that, look, they're teaching these concepts of critical race theory and whatnot within our school system. And people say, oh, no, they're not. No, they're not. Show me in the curriculum where that's real. Well, it's not that they were putting it directly in the curriculum. What was happening is they were contracting with different 501c3s, different groups, whether it was Ibram X. Kendi or the Southern Poverty Law Center. And these people were coming in and they were teaching the teachers to view the world through a certain lens. And that's what a lot of these DEI programs are about. It's not just about making people aware of different cultural considerations, or perhaps providing a hand up or some assistance to somebody who really is a noble candidate for a particular position or job, but just can't seem to get a break because they didn't have enough resources. That's not what this is. It's about teaching people to view the world through a certain lens which focuses on oppressor and oppressed. And so by DOGE going through and systematically identifying these contracts, they're not just removing really, really bad policies, which ultimately elevate superficial characteristics over skill sets, competencies, character, which is actually relevant to the job. It's not just about removing that. If that was all it was doing, that would be fantastic. That would be fabulous. That in and of itself would ensure that we're moving toward hiring practices and procedures within the federal government, that we're focused on making sure that the best person for the job gets the job, regardless of those other superficial characteristics. If they wanted to add a component or a program that maybe gave help to somebody that had grown up in difficult circumstances, I think most of us would have been able to say, yeah, we can see it. We can see a pathway for that. Americans love the underdog, but that's not what DEI was about. It never was about that. It won't be about that in the future because it is so inextricably tied to a particular political philosophy. So you remove that and you're already improving hiring processes and the culture within a particular organization, not to mention all the money that you're saving as a result, because I think taxpayers could find much better uses for $420 million than liberals paying their buddies in 501c3s to run these programs or to get high paying senior executive positions within the federal government implementing such programs. So right off the bat, you've achieved a positive cultural change within these organizations. Plus, you've achieved a good financial change with these organizations because this is not a good use of taxpayer dollars. Let's look at a couple of the other ones here real quick too. There was a $784 million in taxpayer dollars for a new embassy in South Sudan initiated in 2023. This is not a reasonable expenditure. This is another thing too, when you look at some of these massive infrastructure projects, keep in mind, it's not just about building a sound or safe building that has, electricity and plumbing that works right. So many times they implement all of these additional procedures or standards which require green energy facilitation or whatever else it might be. And once again, these tend to benefit those contractors which have organized themselves in such a way as to take advantage of these various, construction projects. And so a lot of times they're getting paid a whole lot more than they probably should for what they're doing in some cases because there's all these add-ons which are not necessary for the structure. And I think most people will look at why do we need a $784 million embassy in South Sudan? You're telling me there's not a current building that we might be able to go in and renovate? You're telling me that we can't construct something that would provide ample security for less than close to $1 billion? I mean, come on, that's just ridiculous. Another one we want to go into here, and this is kind of an interesting one, and it kind of goes to show how I think sometimes we don't recognize the cost associated with government spending. We just kind of assume that, okay, yeah, we know that there's waste kind of baked into it, but we don't realize just how inefficient it is. So the penny, get this, the penny costs over 3 cents to make and costs U.S. taxpayers over $179 million in fiscal year 2023. The Mint produced over 4.5 billion pennies in 2023, around 40% of the 11.4 billion coins for circulation produced. Penny for 3 cents for your thoughts. And this is, again, them talking about how do we really need more pennies in circulation right now, especially when it costs us essentially 3 times what the penny is actually worth as far as currency is concerned. And so these were some of the things that they just, again, either recommended or things that are already starting to be reduced as a result of what the DOGE is doing. Now, right off the bat, you saw people coming out and news articles coming out saying, oh, well, my goodness, they've only, Elon Musk wanted to cut $2 trillion from the budget. And at this pace, they're not anywhere near that. Okay. Again, this is the part where if journalists actually wanted to engage in anything resembling intellectual honesty, they would recognize that to identify this low-hanging fruit right off the bat within 80 hours of coming online is actually pretty significant. It also demonstrates that they have people looking in the right places, right? They're looking for programs across the board that need to be cut because they're counterproductive and expensive. But it also shows efficiencies with things like infrastructure projects, as well as things like why are we doing all these pennies, right? I highly doubt it was the same person or team that was looking at all 3 of those things, which means they're organizing DOGE in such a way as to look for efficiencies. And we said this initially, it's going to be really, really critical that DOGE look for this low-hanging fruit right off the bat in order to kind of help with the overall narrative, which I believe is absolutely true. This is not just marketing, it's true. But it's this idea of so much government waste. And yeah, it's fine for, news articles and journalists to come out and say, well, who cares? $423 million is a rounding error in the overall U.S. budget. Yeah, it is. But $423 million can do a lot of good in the hands of the taxpayers who earned it in the first place, or perhaps in service to a different program, which is actually a legitimate function of government. So don't buy into the articles which are trying to trash DOGE is not doing enough already. Because one of the other things that we established right off the bat is that in order for DOGE to be effective, it's not good enough to just go after the information that you could get with a public FOIA request. It's going to be necessary to work with the secretaries of various departments, the heads of various agencies, in order to be able to do a very thorough audit, in order to determine which processes need to be changed, in order to gain efficiencies, right? And reduce fraud, waste, abuse, and just wasteful spending. Right? You're going to actually need cooperation from the organizations, from the institutions that you're going to be auditing. And while, thank God, we have some of those people already being selected, there's no question that some of this has been somewhat slow rolled. And so it's going to be, a lot of the stuff is going to be able to move faster when all of Trump's appointees are confirmed and in place and in a position to be able to cooperate with DOGE. And then the second part is going to be when the legislative committees in both the House and the Senate are also cooperating with DOGE, because a lot of things that they're focusing on right now can be done through executive order. There's going to be other things that need to be done through legislation. So again, we should all expect the media to do this, right? They're either going to claim they're not moving fast enough, or they're going to claim they're moving too fast, or they're going to claim that they're hurting people. And let me give two examples of this right off the bat so you can see what I'm talking about. So if you go again to the DOGE Twitter here, we have an example of changing transaction description of federal contract from DEIA activities to workforce management. And what they're doing is they're actually showing the award history. All right, this is the various contracts that are awarded, where 1 minute it's saying one thing and the next minute it's saying something else. We saw the same thing with job descriptions of various people, where you can find their positions on the website for the agency, where 1 minute it said, senior executive responsible for for the DEI program, and the next minute it just says senior executive. And it's like, oh, okay, so they get it. Right. This is one of the things that we argued. It's not just going to be the press pushing back against this. The bureaucracy itself will organize it such a way in order to protect itself. And if that means it has to change the job description from one thing that is DEI focused to something completely different, it will. Because the bureaucracy has always been used to getting away with this. The difference is, I think, Donald Trump is going to use Schedule F, which again, Schedule F is the way it distinguishes federal employees from those that are just civil service workers versus those which are responsible for actually implementing the president's agenda and policies. I'm sorry, but if anywhere you were a senior executive or you were running a DEI program, you should fall within Schedule F, and the president should be able to fire you. And the fact that so many of these people instantly changed their job descriptions from one thing to a next the moment that they were cutting DEI programs not only demonstrates that they know what's going on and is trying to subvert it, but it demonstrates a certain level of deceitfulness. That should be grounds right there. Just, you're gone. You're gone. You could have said, yeah, this was my job title, but I'd still like to work with the agency. Here's all the other things that I've done in the past and why I think I would still be a good fit within the administration. But you didn't. You tried to be deceptive. And that right now should be cause for action. You're gone. You're fired now. You're trying to lie about what you actually do with the agency. Goodbye. Another perfect example of this has to do, and I talked before about how a lot of this ends up being a boondoggle for leftist 501c3s or contracting companies in order to get what they want, or to put your leftist buddies into positions within the bureaucracy where they can essentially run their own agenda apart from what the president actually wants. And Adam Coleman, I got this is great. Adam Coleman posted this on Twitter. We have the link in there. Take notice: when DEI jobs die out due to unpopularity, white leftists will make it sound like black people are mostly affected. Truth is, this was always a grift for white mediocre college graduates. Their worthless degrees was ideal for an industry that doesn't require thinking. And this is the part. This comes from Zippa.com. He has this great chart on here. It says Chief Diversity Officer Statistics by Race and Gender. White, 76.1%. Hispanic or Latino, 7.8%. Asian, 7.7%. Unknown, 3.9%. Black or African American, 3.8%. American Indian, Alaska Native, 0.7%. Women earn 92 cents for every $1 earned by men. This is within this category. Male income, $99,575. Female income, $91,254. The most common ethnicity among chief diversity officers is white. So here's Adam bringing up a great point, that for all of this talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, the very positions were predominantly staffed by white people. And again, let's be honest, white liberals at a percentage that's even higher than the percentage of whites within the United States. So he makes an excellent point here. And I love it when people catch the left kind of at their own game, where they demonstrate that DEI was less about actually providing opportunities for marginalized groups and more about providing opportunities to white liberals with worthless college degrees. So good riddance, goodbye. I'm glad those federal jobs are going away. I'm also glad that those federal contracts are going away, because it's not just a waste of taxpayer dollars. It's actually detrimental to the culture of these organizations, that we need to be actually performing legitimate functions of government. The other thing that I want to bring up, and this came up today actually on the floor of the House of Delegates. So when they got rid of DEI programs within the Defense Department, and Pete Hegseth, Secretary Hegseth, was adamant about, we're getting rid of these now. They're highly detrimental to the United States military. And look, we can see what DEI is bad enough when it's being implemented at some throwaway office at the Environmental Protection Agency. But we see how devastating DEI can be when it comes to, I don't know, positions like firefighters. Southern California is going through this right now. No, it's not all because of DEI, but when you actually have an assistant chief that makes close to $400,000 a year getting out there and saying as part of their promo ad that, well, I might not be able to carry your husband out of a fire, but if he got into a fire, he got himself in the wrong place. This is what happened. The consequences of elevating superficial characteristics over necessary skill sets important to the actual job to be completed becomes exponentially worse when we're talking about jobs that deal with crisis situations or danger or where violence may be necessary, like the military. That may sound nice in a boardroom somewhere where somebody says, yeah, when your house is on fire, you want someone to show up that looks like you. No, I want someone competent. And the same is true for the people that I want defending my country. When I was serving overseas in combat, I cared far less about how someone looked than I did about whether or not they were competent at their job, because I wanted to be able to successfully do my mission and get home to my wife and kids. And so did they. So we rewarded competence. So I'm thrilled that Pete Hegseth did this. But what happened next, and this is a term we all need to get very familiar with over the next several years. What happened next is something called malicious compliance. Malicious compliance, to summarize, is the idea that, let's say you work for a particular agency and you're not in charge and you don't set policy, but you have your own ideas, you have your own agendas, and all of a sudden new leadership comes in and they don't agree with your ideology. They don't agree with your agendas. And so instead of either complying with the fact that we've had an election, this is the new leadership, and I need to be able to do my job to the best of my ability, or stepping down from the position, you instead decide to subvert the new leadership. You decide to subvert the people that are implementing the new policies you don't agree with. So how would you go about doing that? Well, let's say you look at something like DEI and you say, okay, DEI, what is a way that I could try to implement? What is a way that I can try to comply with this new policy that says that we're not doing DEI? Well, maybe, let's say you're working at the Air Force. You decide that you're going to remove courses on groups like the Tuskegee Airmen from Air Force basic training. Why? Oh, don't you understand why? The Tuskegee Airmen were black. And so we're going to remove it because you don't want DEI. You want to know what's really ironic about that? Men like those who comprised one of the most illustrious units in World War II, the Tuskegee Airmen, men who comprised units like that were denied opportunities in the United States of America due to government policies, which did what? Elevated superficial characteristics over capability and character. You better believe I want people to understand what the Tuskegee Airmen did, not just because of the tactical and strategic success that they had in combat, but because of the things that they had to overcome. They're a demonstration of why you don't want policies like DEI, which discriminate against people based off of superficial characteristics. No. They didn't remove lessons about the Tuskegee Airmen from the basic training classes in the Air Force because they honestly believed that that's what Pete Hegseth or the Trump administration wanted to achieve. They didn't do it for that. They did it because they wanted to give the bureaucrats, which secure their jobs, or the politicians, which secure their jobs, talking points. And that's exactly what happened. I sat there today as a member of the Virginia House of Delegates, got up there. How dare the Trump administration do this? We cannot sit down and be compliant or complicit or silent as they erase the history of this illustrious unit. And then I got up afterwards. I'm like, but they didn't. As soon as Pete Hegseth was made aware of what happened, he immediately reinstated that training. And I hope the very next thing he will do will be to fire whatever mid-level bureaucrats were engaging in what I believe was malicious compliance. You want another example of malicious compliance? I remember when there was an argument about the government shutdown, right? We didn't have sufficient budgets. We couldn't get a continuing resolution. And so what did Barack Obama do? Right? Barack Obama decided that because the government had to shut down, he was actually going to use law enforcement resources to go out to the Capitol Mall in Washington, D.C. and shut down open air monuments. World War II veterans were not allowed to actually visit their monument, which sits there out in the open in the middle of the D.C. Mall because Barack Obama decided he was going to punish his ideological opponents. He was going to punish his political opponents. You want to shut down? You don't want to give me the money that I want to spend? Fine. I'm going to make it as painful as possible on everyday citizens. In this case, World War II veterans. I'm going to make it hard on them in the hope that you will relent. And that's what was going on here. I guarantee you somebody pulled those courses because they wanted to try to embarrass the administration. They wanted to try to embarrass Pete Hegseth, not because they wanted to faithfully execute the orders of the new administration that was duly elected. No. They had their own ideological objectives. They had their own interests, which were separate from the duly elected people and appointees. And so they decided to try to make problems. So, Secretary Hegseth, thank you for reinstating that course. I had no doubt that you would. Now, please fire the people that got rid of it because they will continue to be a thorn in the side. They are the very people within the bureaucracy that constantly works to subvert any sort of change. Any sort of change. And those are the people that need to go. When we talk about the deep state, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about people that get into positions of influence of power within the bureaucracy, not for the purpose of faithfully executing the duties of the executive branch, but rather to subvert it to their own ideological end states. And I think it is great when they expose themselves like this. Because in most cases, what they're going to do is slow roll things. In most cases, what they're going to do is they're going to subvert the process, not by efficiently doing the wrong thing, but by inefficiently doing the right thing so badly that you can't get anything accomplished. But anytime they present themselves, that becomes a perfect excuse to remove that person from that position. So just to recap everything that DOGE has done in the first, week of being in operation, about 420 million saved from the removal of DEI programs, infrastructure projects, stopping a $748 million infrastructure project in South Sudan, or at least recommending that it should be stopped because we don't need an embassy that, robust and fancy in South Sudan. And then again, finding efficiency with things like pennies. And I know right now these all seem like small measures, and they are in the big scheme of things, but that's where we got to start. Because so much of what's going on right now, and you already see the ideological battles taking place over, so much of this is not about honest people just coming together and trying to find better ways in order to faithfully execute the duties and responsibilities of the federal government in a way that is fiscally, socially, and morally responsible. No. It's about the fact that a particular ideology has entrenched itself so deeply in the bureaucracy, and it is not giving up without a fight. And so we've got to be prepared to explain what is going on and to demonstrate both the fraud, waste, and abuse that they're trying to cut out and the various tactics and measures that elements within the bureaucracy will go to in order to save their privileged spot at your expense. So that's our DOGE update for this week, right? Please stick around. We're also going to be looking at some other venues. I think we got some guests that are going to be coming on. We got some members from Congress that want to come on and talk about some of the things that they're going to be working on with DOGE, because like I said, some of this is going to require legislation. Can't all be executive branch. Plus, we will also have some people that are working as senior advisors, as experts within various areas, which will be of great use to the efforts of the DOGE. And we will be interviewing them here on this channel on DOGE Watch, but we're also looking at maybe setting up some X spaces here in the not so distant future to be able to give you an opportunity to be able to chime in and be a part of the conversation. Once again, thank you for joining us for this episode of DOGE Watch, and we will see you next time.